Welcome back to This Is Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. With me in the studio, I have Professor David Aworawo, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos. Jide Ologun, legal practitioner and national development advocate. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office Enough, as well as Professor Anthony Killer, Professor of Strategy and Development and Institute Director at the Commonwealth Institute of Advanced and Professional Studies. Well, Yemi and gentlemen, thank you very much for keeping faith with This Is Live, the Sunday talk show. Now today we have our two guests. We have looked at 5 different topics, more or less. With Dr. Ifeanyiwa Nwakwesi, we discussed International Women's Day, which was celebrated yesterday. We touched briefly on the issue of Senator Akpabio versus Senator Akpochi, or if you like, Senator Akpochi-Uduaghan versus Senator Akpabio. And then we had a second guest who looked at the attack on the premises of the Ikeja disco on Thursday by men of the Ikeja base of the Nigerian Armed Forces, owing Ikeja disco 4 billion naira for cumulatively over the last 7 years. And they went there to say, we won't pay because we can't pay. More or less, we are above the law. I think we looked at that. We looked at increased ATM charges based on the directive of the CBN. And we also talked about this perpetual national grid collapse, cumulatively, about 5 different topics. But I would like to start with you, Yemi Adamolekun. International Women's Day, accelerate action. You have been in that scene, saying enough is enough in terms of discrimination, not just against women or against anybody. And then, of course, I've seen your comments on Akpochi-Uduaghan versus Akpabio. Let's start with you, and then we get other contributions.
Thank you. I mean, men talk about the fact that they barely get 1 day, but women get a whole month. Because it's not just International Women's Day, it's literally Women's Month, the month of March. And I think it's important to remind society that we're still a long road from equity. Women still don't get paid equally as men do. Women still struggle to work their way through the corporate ladder. And then there are obviously the issues of sexual and gender-based violence, the issues of not enough female representation in politics, issues of patriarchal society that we live in that's enforced by culture and religion. So there are issues on many fronts, but despite and in spite of that, women still continue to blaze the trail in different areas. I mean, people were, queuing across street blocks to see Chimamanda Adichie and get her to autograph a book. In Nigeria recently, we talk about the number of banks that are headed by women, role of women in the arts, role of women in music. So there are a lot of positive things that we can point to, most certainly. But there are still some things that happen that makes you realize just how far the journey still is into getting society to see women as equal partners in society, equal partners in development. As the saying says, you can't clap with one hand. You need both hands to clap. So in a country where women make 50% of your population, but you still feel that they are not good enough, they shouldn't be heard or seen, it's a structural problem that still needs a lot of work to dismantle in the way that men are raised, in the way that society amplifies issues related to women. I mean, we had Lagos State last week, and even the way the media captured it, Miranda, then Lagos State Speaker, was presented as emotional weak, whereas Obasa in all his thuggishness was presented as something good or something, I don't know, to be emulated perhaps. And so just those norms of gender norming of how we see, even when we raise children, we raise a girl with dolls and cooking, and we raise boys with toys and more hard, quote-unquote, hard things. But anyway, the issue on the table, which is very interesting that we're discussing it in around International Women's Day of Senator Natasha and Senator Akpabio. And I think for me, I want to use the statement that the Senate issued yesterday as context for kind of my comments on the matter. So Senator Bamidele issued a statement basically responding to international media that had correlated Senator Natasha's suspension with sexual harassment, basically saying that because she petitioned or made allegations for sexual harassment, she was then suspended. The sequencing is not true in terms of a direct correlation, but the underlying cause is true because Senator Natasha reacted to a seat movement because in a sense she had had enough. She had had enough of being victimized, being picked at by Senator Akpabio, and underlying that was also her then allegations of sexual harassment. So at the time that her seat was moved, she had had enough, and she did react in that manner. Now, did she disobey the rules of the Senate? We can debate that all we want. But at the point that she now made the allegations, it was more like, look, this is why my outburst was that bad. These are the things that I've been going through. I'm going through a lot in that Senate, and this is the reason why. Now, the Senate, number one, there was a court order saying that the investigation should be stayed, but they went ahead to set up the committee. Senator Natasha did not appear before the committee because there was a court order. So while the Senate chose to disobey the court order, she chose to obey it. So that's why she wasn't there. Number two, there's court precedents, I think probably about 3 or 4 cases, stating that a sitting senator is not an employee of the Senate. Therefore, the Senate cannot wake up and say, you cannot call yourself a senator, you cannot get paid, we will remove your salary, we will close your office. She's not your employee. Secondly, I think if I'm not mistaken, the court judgment also said you can't suspend a senator for more than 14 days. Because if you suspend them longer than that, you are depriving their constituents from representation, and they were elected. So the Senate, the 10th Senate, ignores all of that and decides to give Senator Natasha a 6-month suspension, tells her not to call herself by senator, blah, 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 blah. Senator Bamidele conveniently ignores that. And then lastly, and I think very interestingly, Senator Bamidele in his statement makes a big deal of the fact that her suspension is not tied to sexual harassment, then says her petition was not properly filed, or forgets, or maybe intentionally excludes the fact that she represented her petition on Friday. So the first time it was presented was on Thursday, and Senator Akpabio collected it, but then they threw it out. She came back on Friday and represented it. Senator Bamidele writes the statement dated yesterday, March 8th, but conveniently forgets to say that she represented her petition and that they were going to look at it. Now, if we need us to know anything about the 10th Senate and any plans that they have to give Senator Natasha fair hearing, this is it. Because if you say that she was not suspended because of sexual harassment, but you truly think her allegations around sexual harassment are worthy of investigation, are worthy of actually some, even if it's a charade, that you actually plan to listen to it, then you will say that even though it was dismissed because it wasn't properly filed, she represented it on Friday, and the Senate will ensure that the processes of investigation will be upheld. There was no such thing in Senator Bamidele's statement. And for me, they said out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And it is out of that abundance of Senator Bamidele and his cohort's heart that they have spoken that Senator Natasha is not going to get fair hearing. Because how is this an uproar, an international uproar, that a senator was suspended because of sexual harassment allegations? You sit down and you pen a 2-page statement, and not once in there do you say that her allegations will be given fair hearing. The 10th Assembly, or the 10th Senate, let me not say Assembly, the 10th Senate should be very ashamed of itself. One, for violating court orders, and you are the legislative arm of government. You make laws. But there are court precedents, there are court judgments that you decided to flout. And then a fellow member of yours says she was harassed. But you write a statement and you ignore it because you obviously have no plans. But no. This is 2025. The 10th Senate is going to know that women are not going to sit and just watch. And thankfully, Senator Natasha is a fighter. She got to where she got to by fighting. And she fought men to become a senator of the Federal Republic. And she's still a senator of the Federal Republic. And women will stand with her to let not just Nigerian senators, Senator Akpabio and his cohorts, know that this will not die. We will not watch this die. Okay,
Mr. Ologun, your turn. Just be reminded that there are 5 topics on the table. Yemi has dealt with at least 2.
I'm not talking about the others.
You know, let's also mix it with the other topics.
Engagement. So let me start with the International Women's Day to commend the Nigerian women and the resilience. And in church today, I described women as wonderful, which stands for the W, the O as organizers, then the M as magnificence, you know, if you like that, and the A as adorable.
We're adorable.
And here you are, you know, and the N as noble. And I think Dr.
Very romantic
mentioned
discussion.
something very important. The woman also needs to know who she is. And that point I appreciate in her. And I plead to do a copyright of that presentation, very brilliant, because when I engage women, I let them know that there is actually no room for competition with man. You just need to go out there, deliver your values, and collaborate as a gender force to reach your goal. Because after God made man, he decided I can do something better. So he created woman. So congratulations to women. And the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces has actually declared that women constitute the strength of the nation. And from the Beijing Declaration years ago, the issue of gender equality is on the table. So it's time for women to galvanize, occupy their space, and be more relevant in the society, even though Nigeria has not really achieved much in trying to create this space. But like a wise man said, if your market does not exist, you create it. So go and occupy that space. And that brings us to the issue in the Senate. I've monitored it keenly. And I want to say that the issue of sexual harassment is a very strong issue. And I want it thoroughly investigated, you know, as a human resource practitioner, because it's not just about the sexual intercourse aspect of it. There are several cases we have considered. There was a case of AGK and Microsoft where tickling women in the office became an issue. And AGK decided to go to court, and she won because she eventually lost her job as a result of her resistance. So it shouldn't be allowed that we have sexual harassment. But again, if you allege sexual harassment, you must be able to establish it. And I read the response of Honorable Bamidele, and I doubt if I want to contest that, because according to him, they have procedures. And I know at least one senator has been suspended in the past that has to do with their ethics and procedural rules, because there are many aspects of these allegations. And, you know, finally on that, I want to remind the Senate that what Section 4 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended says is that you make laws for the peace, orderliness, and good government in Nigeria. I want to see you do that and focus on developing the country and avoid distractions. And that brings us to the issue of the Air Force invasion of the Ikeja Electric Office, you know, in Alausa in Lagos. In 1986, MKO Abiola, then still alive, had, you know, a challenge with the Air Force, some Air Force officials, and he was manhandled. So he went to Air Commodore Nura Imam to complain, and the man responded as a leader that when you touch the uniform of an Air Force of military, he behaves like a mad dog, and that is where the coinage mad dog came from. So when you now disconnect the electricity supply to their cantonments, I don't know how to describe them. And again, that has happened. And it's a systemic issue. And Doctor, I personally decided to go into some details, reported details. The position of the Air Force is that they've been having meetings. They've even paid some, you know, millions of naira to the Ikeja Electric.
4 billion.
Allegedly. and that there is an agreement, you supply 10 to 12 hours, all those are non-issues for me because it's a systemic failure that we have in the country. If Air Force is owing, it's bad enough. You see, all these things, even a state government at the time was harassed for owing. So we need to fine-tune all this. Why should that be? And now they've gone to beat up people and to harass them. Where do we go from there? Who holds them to accountability? And that brings me to the important incident that happened in the Lagos State House of Assembly that many are still confused on how to analyze it. How the DSS came in using the force as against engaging the rule of law. And I wonder where we are going from here. And so I'm not going to lay blame on anybody's table, whether it's Ikeja Electric or Air Force, but to say that can we come to a point in this country when responsibilities are respected? And closely connected to that is the denied collapse of national grid, because I read a report saying that it was a line tripping.
Yeah.
Whether it's a line tripping or not, I think the first electrical installation in Nigeria must have been around 1898 or thereabout. By now, we should have gone beyond where we are, particularly when you consider the effect on national development, on industrialization, and good life for the citizens. And I hope that government will prioritize. Many of us have said, and it's still been voiced, that you need to look at the obsolete equipment, the issue of prioritization. We cannot be doing things the old ways and expect new results. And it's coming when the ministry even is boasting of increasing the production to about 6,000 megawatts. So we need to strengthen that aspect of our national life. And for the ATM fees, do Nigerians have any comment? I know we have the banking supervision department in the CBN. We have the bank examination. Are customers protected in this country? Should the heavy weight of some governmental policies on the banks be borne by the customers? And who fights for the customers? Because most of the time, these policies are implemented without any opportunity for the customers to build themselves out. But we just hope that holistically, the stakeholders will consider the interests of the majority of the citizens in downloading their business weight on the citizens.
Okay, Professor Aworawo, your take.
Thank you very much. Barrister Ologun said he won't lay blame. I will lay blame. But let me first congratulate women. The progress has been slow, but progress is being made. Yemi made reference to women in the banking sector. I also want to make reference to women in the university administration.
In academics.
Yes. We have so many of them all over the place. My own university too, the same thing. Lagos University of Education, the same thing. Women all over the place. And that is highly, LASU, the same thing. It was not, it wasn't, yes, it wasn't always like that. In addition to that, when you look at the admission in the university, except the Faculty of Engineering, almost everywhere else, women are now more than men.
Even at the secondary school level, the girls score better grades.
So
the boys are busy watching football and playing around.
It's been slow. Beijing was 1995.
Yes.
Where, by the way, we understand Nigeria had the largest delegation, and it was under Abacha. But progress is being made, slow though. But we congratulate women for, even if it's incremental. At least we are not going backwards. We are making some progress.
In political space, we are. Because this membership, just in terms of numbers, for example, in the National Assembly.
I think we have, how many do we have? Only 3 or 4?
We have 4 women in
Senate,
and I think
16
in House of Reps. I think it was 2007 that we had the highest numbers.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, but all the same, we congratulate women. I want to say a couple of things about the Natasha thing, because there are key issues that have been left unaddressed to my mind. One of them that concerns me is the structure of the Senate, how the Senate is administered. Because all of this brouhaha, I think, was easily avoidable. How do they communicate? If communication had gone on, we are changing seats, because somebody defected, please find comfort in your news, that everybody got, because they said they sent, but Natasha said she didn't get. Some other people also said they didn't get. How does the Senate communicate? Because many small things that could lead to a whole lot of crisis like we have now, could be avoided if there is proper communication. How is that carried out in Senate? That is one. The second thing has to do with what I would describe as politics of bitterness. I've been teaching Nigerian political history for about 10 years now. And when we analyze the First Republic, Second Republic, one thing that comes prominently is the fact that the two republics, a major cause for their collapse was the practice of politics of bitterness. And you could see it in every aspect of, Yemi just talked about the court order. There's a court order. Why don't you wait and vacate that court order? Senator Siriake Dixon said they got notice of meeting for Tuesday, 11th. That would have given them time to robustly debate and then try and vacate that court order, and whatever action they want to take, let them take it. They didn't do all of that. And that escaped everybody in Senate. And they just went ahead, even with the court order, and thought it was right to just punish her.
But the court order, was it served on them? It's not enough to just say there was a court order. It has to be served. And there must be and there must be evidence that it was served. I'm just raising a
yes.
I'm just raising a
I hear you, but I'm saying that would be an easy
so because they can say, as far as we are concerned,
some of them
it's not being served.
Some of them have
they
commented
can
on it. The fact that some of them have commented on it, I will assume that at least they know that there was such a...
Where is the proof of service?
No. It's not a matter of proof, sir. Let's also be clear. While I hear you, no.
You can't act on it. Another that has not been served.
What I'm saying is that it's not even the
spoken about it.
None of them, not Bamidele, nor the clerk or anyone says we have not been served. It's also their responsibility to absolve themselves of guilt. You can't hold me to something that I did not receive. So it's their responsibility to say that. I can't be thinking for them that perhaps they were not served. You say it if you were not served.
Then we move on. And then, of course, the point about their one order 6-7, and of course, court rulings on it that a senator should not be, she should not be suspended for more than 4 weeks. And they went ahead and suspended her for 2 weeks rather, for 6 months. And what was even very shocking to me is this Labour Party man, is it Imasuen? A Labour Party man suspended, after suspending Natasha, the aides who were suspended, they were not to be paid for 6 months. If not for Jesus Okalu and Ned Nwoko, who raised the issue and said, no, let us exclude them. A Labour Party man didn't see anything wrong in those workers not getting paid for 6 months.
For work, for
it is more than unimaginable.
Yeah.
But that was what played out. And then I want to so for the Senate moving forward, the way they communicate, the way they administer, so that all of these small things that will distract from serious matters will not, will be taken care of. And then the spokesperson for Senate, Yemi Adamolekun, I have a small advice for him. He should just leave this Natasha issue. It is splashing, rough things on his body. When Natasha entered the Senate with the husband, Emmanuel Orisejolomi Oduanga, and they kissed.
The Alema of Warwick.
Yes, and they kissed, and the woman entered the Disney. Yemi Adamolekun didn't go to sleep. He said she was creating content. And when the woman sat at the last day, that day she was suspended, he again went and said, Natasha, that seat, she said she would not sit. Was that not the seat? As if he has nothing else to do than Natasha.
Obviously doesn't.
I have an advice. He's behaving like the PA to Akpabio.
That's it.
Please, he's a senator. He's too high for the small things he's doing. So that we can have some, the Senate should be decorum. The things he's doing is distracting from the decorum of the Senate. And of course, there are a couple of others as well, but him especially. In fact, when he came to Arise on Monday, the 3rd, and when the question was thrown to him, how do you handle sexual harassment in the Senate? The answer he first gave was that the allegation of Natasha of sexual harassment is not true.
Can you imagine?
Was he there?
Can you imagine?
Was he there? It's possible it is true. It's possible it is
not
false.
from your constituency?
How?
Yes, something in
I'm from Ondo State, please.
Doctor, may I recommend public relations training for
Me,
the
I don't know,
handlers
and the
of
people that
information in the National Assembly. You know, public relations,
I think they do
we help
always
them
retreat from
out.
that. Now,
You know, real one.
finally, two things. The national grid, whether tripping or collapsing of the grid. In fact, there is Bekelemes in Nigeria's energy sector as we speak.
Peculiar mess.
Yes, there is peculiar mess. There is Bekelemes. I'm sure if the minister is watching, he will smile. I'm not trying to, speak about him disparagingly. I'm only saying that there's a lot in that sector that needs overhauling. But Ologun spoke about obsolete equipment and all of that. There is a whole lot. So that if we are celebrating 6,000 megawatt, there should be corresponding, efficiency in the sector. Then the military that went to invade, that's where I said they were discussing. That's the Air Force officers who went there to, they were discussing, according to the information we have. Why don't you just follow through that discussion and let them restore power? Yeah. Now they've gone there, invaded the place, power still is not restored as we speak, at least maybe now. By the time we're leaving this, we have friends there, the power is still not restored. We thought that Nigeria had gone past that stage where some military people would just enter, jump into buses, carry gun, and then molest people and say nobody can do anything to them. I think the military authorities should take a very strong look at this. This is a democracy. And then finally, ATM. Well, we understand that we now have money in the ATM. From the time that the new tariff, took off, we now have money in the ATM. So the question we're asking Dr. Muda is, the answer is that there's no money in the ATM because,
you pay more charges.
But the question I ask is, who will defend the poor Nigerian? I understand Dr. Muda's position that let us do a study to be able to ascertain whether it is too high or too low. But we don't need Solomonic wisdom to see that it's too high. Sometimes they just yank off so much money from, I don't have time to go to the bank to go and make trouble with them. They take all sorts of money here and there. And then the government has not done well in this matter. They should, the burden for what is going on in Nigeria, our economic problem, should not be borne by the ordinary man alone. It should spread across. We hope that some reason will prevail. They will take another look at it, and so that the ordinary man will not die from the weight of so much, economic. Yes.
Anyway, no, I wanted to go to Professor Kila.
Just a quick one before we go to Professor. On this, your point about content. Might I also remind Mr. Adamolekun, since he seems to like content, probably last year, Mrs. Akpabio came to the Senate, and there is a photo of her kissing her husband. So, Mr. Adamolekun, if you need something to talk about, maybe you can do that too.
Okay, let's hear from Professor Anthony Kila, who is in our Abuja studio. Professor Kila, your turn.
Yes, good evening. Good evening. The Obasa of our rise, Dr. Ruben Abati. Let me start from the CBN issue, from the ATM issue. And I start to say I'm not impressed by the way the CBN is handling this matter. No matter what the intention is, the CBN comes across as an agency that wants to subsidize the rich bank at the detriment of the average consumer and citizens, regardless of the reason why. My advice to the CBN is that they need to take a different, a kind of holistic approach to the banking and finance sector and understand that maybe the old banking model is going out of date. The future is fintech. The future is electronic transfer. The future is electronic payment. And whilst we're at the present, before we go to the future, it is a known fact that for reasons of being better organized or collusion or conspiracy, the POS are working better than banks. I'll advise the CBN to view their task as ensuring smooth financial transaction and not aiding banks to provide more machines. The banks have been sharing their profits for long, and I say this as a defender of the private sector, but they've not called the consumers or the citizens to share their profit. So I see no reason why people should now share their restructuring or reconciliation or expansion bill. They should take up their bill themselves. I think the CBN is patently wrong. In terms of the power issue, my view is that, and I heard your very insightful interview, my view is that overall we have technical issues to deal with, we have policy issues to deal with, and we also have sort of human resources issue to deal with. I think that is what led Professor Aworawo to talk about the peculiar mess, otherwise known as Pengele mess, which he talked about. Undoubtedly, these, the machines and the structures and everything that the past company use needs to be updated. But there's also an issue of pricing and availability, i.e. stability of power, that they need to resolve. And therein, policy needs to solve that. I also propose that policy needs to look at the tariffs and the payments by government structure and some essential services. Hospitals, military, of course I'll put university, wouldn't I? There are some essential structure which I think should be tariffed in a different way, and their payments should be managed a different way. It is very clear to everybody that the attitude of the Air Force going to beat up workers of the power distributors, the power company, is wrong. And there's a lesson for us there. I want viewers to be honest with themselves. How many people have been tempted to beat or curse or jeer power staff, by electricity, people working in the electric sector staff? How many people? People should be honest with themselves. But therein lies the link in the civil society. Just because we think something doesn't mean we can do it or we should do it. And I believe when people do what is wrong, there should be consequence for it. And that is a very key issue that we need to look at there. The power sector needs to be upgraded. The human factor is there. Truth be told, there are too many staff, mid-level, low-level, high-level, who work in the power sector that do not have a modicum sense of customer service when they would deal with consumers, the people who are supposed to be their clients and customers. A simple thing is the note they write when they want to speak to businesses or homeowners or residents. They summon them. They summon them as if they're working for the power electric company, as if they're their staff. I think part of the mess that they need to sort out is to have a look at all these issues, the technical issue, the customer service, and matter of policy, tariffing and payment for some sectors of the society. I think that's a crucial point. The Women's Day, I think it's a good thing that women keep raising their voice, but it's also important to know two things. Number one is that the achievement of women in the past 50 years is being overshadowed by, the remaining sports that they want to achieve. So I think it's important they raise both sides. I also think it's important that women desist from assimilation or conforming to the male narrative or reacting to the male narrative. I think some women need to sit down to lead the future of feminism and face some specific, very tangible battles, not general ones. For example, I proposed on Women's Day this year that women should take time to fight a battle, for example, to say that the name of children should be in their name in every society. Because whilst the paternity of a child can be disputed, that of a mother cannot. Perhaps they should pay more attention on that. And perhaps they should also pay more attention on the role of some women who use their femininity instead of merit and substance to deal with things. In a general way, so that truly being a woman should be something that allows people to embrace their identity and fight specific oppression and discrimination, not a general barrier. When the drama, when the 49 days of Merenda happened in Lagos, I cautioned some people that the triumph of saying the first female speaker was probably out of place because there is no history of that speaker in which she has acted differently than the male inside that house. So we should be very careful embracing this gender thing either positively or negatively. But a lot of things have been said about the issue of the Senate that turned from Akoti versus Akpabio to Akoti versus the Senate. Some things are clear. Number one is that the members of that Senate do not seem to care very much about perception and sensibility, and they've been technical, almost brutal in the way they act. But I think we need to sit down to look at some facts very carefully, not leaving out perception and sensibility, but focus on a lot of fact. And I think those who are really interested in what is going on will conclude that the mode of communication, the method of relationship in the Senate need to be looked at. I spoke to a very senior senator, and I was accusing that senator of not being sensitive or sympathetic with Senator Akpoti-Gwadon at all. And the senator said to me, we've had enough of that drama, that you don't know what we've been going through in our hands. Legitimate true or false, what they've been going through in their hands, I think it's important that they all understand that they're accountable to Nigerians and that their speeches, decorum, and activities should be regulated by the law, not their emotions.
Okay, thank you, Professor Killer. Let's take the very next subject, foreign subject. Sudan has filed a case against the United Arab Emirates at the International Court of Justice, accusing it of violating the Genocide Convention by arming the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The UAE has dismissed the case as baseless and politically motivated. The charges stem from ethnic-based attacks by the RSF and allied militias against the non-Arab Masalit community in West Darfur, which the U.S. classified as genocide earlier this year. Sudan alleges the UAE directly enabled these crimes by supplying weapons. Sudan is seeking emergency measures from the ICJ to halt alleged UAE support for the RSF, though a final ruling could take years. The case further escalates tensions in Sudan's nearly 2-year civil war. Well, I mean, we all know that this is post Omar al-Bashir, the former president. You had those two generals, General al-Bahan and General Emeti Dagalo, fighting over the transitional government in that country, and the RSF saying they should be integrated. That's that conflict at the power level. There's also conflict over resources, with the Wagner group from Russia moving in, and other regional powers also showing interest in resources in Sudan. But after Omar al-Bashir, there is a chaos in Sudan. UAE says, well, this is a cheap publicity stunt, but the international community, the World Court, intervening. Do they even have the powers to enforce their own rulings? After all, they could not enforce rulings in Ukraine. They could not enforce rulings over Gaza. But let me start with you, Professor Killer. Let me just come back to you very quickly about Sudan and the UAE.
Well, I think very quickly, yes, the situation in Sudan seems to be regressing because we were expecting progress to have happened for long and it has not happened. You hit the nail on the head when you talk about resources. The problem we have is that too many people are interested in what is not theirs in Sudan. I see the weakness of the international community, especially the court, but I think Sudan has no choice but to call the attention of the world to the situation. And I think the UAE is being clever by half when he just says that they're playing politics with it. I think there is more to it, but I think Sudan needs to make a big case and try to create an international alliance for its defense and promotion of its interests in that region.
Okay, Professor Aworawo.
Yeah, I am happy Sudan did what it did. The case will likely take many years, and the chances of the case having a direct impact on the fighting, well, that is left to be seen. But what is very clear is that Sudan's going to the courts will embarrass the UAE and will also likely hurt the UAE's support for the rapid support forces. The issue is that the rapid support forces is a combination of different groups that are actually nomadic Arabs. So one can understand UAE's support. But even though the foreign minister tried to deny it, it wasn't very smart. The statement he put out in some way even indicted the UAE. Because in that statement, the foreign minister said Sudan should cease fire and the Sudan should embrace peace and dialogue. But the foreign minister said nothing about the rapid support forces, also embracing peace and all that. It just tells you that UAE at least is sympathetic to the rapid support forces, and we don't know the extent to which it is giving support to it. So the noise Sudan is making is good. It will pave the way for countries that are supporting the rapid support forces to, draw back, and that might help it. But the addendum I'll make to that is that different interventions have been made before now for them to reconcile. Sudan should not maintain a hardline position. It should be able to grant some concessions so that they can resolve that crisis. But this move is good. It will stop those supporting and funding the rapid support forces, at least from doing so.
Well, I agree with you. It will send a very strong statement. However, the bigger issue in Sudan is the humanitarian crisis. Over 25 million people in trouble, thousands, up to about 15,000 displaced. Over 2 million, have had to flee into Chad, Egypt and other neighboring countries.
In fact, 12 million displaced. And Sudan has a population of 50 million.
Oh, okay.
So about close to a quarter of Sudan's population is displaced as we speak.
Okay. Well,
I
Mr.
bring
Ologun.
this to Sudan. It's good for Sudan to shout out for help, but the direct victim is Sudan, just like the scenario we have in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where Rwanda is being accused of supporting the M23. But the battles are hot on the resource-rich country that has been plunged into bloodshed and serious crisis. And even if UAE is denying, if you understand international relations very well, they may still continue. Let's even assume they are supporting, to give that support. But it's now for the warring parties to rise up and say, let's look at this situation and identify how we can resolve our conflicts. It's most of the time about resource, about power. And I think that is what will happen eventually. Look at the case of Russia and Ukraine. Right now, it may be a matter of having to sit together. And you look at the case of Israel and Hamas and Palestine. So the UAE may deny, but is for the warring party. Like they say, when you take the sugar away, the ants will move elsewhere. And I hope that Africa will rise up. I did a research that over 40% of the total resources in the world are domiciled in Africa. And Africa is just about 1.5 billion of about 8 billion population of the whole world. So when are we going to wake up and stop these foreign powers from playing games with the wealth and the future of Africa? So I hope that sensibility has come into them. And it's quite unfortunate, the humanitarian crisis we are having in that region, because quite a number of times, even the world powers you call upon to intervene, they may just be doing that at the theoretical level and not be able to bring peace to the actual situation. So best wishes to that region.
Well, Adamolekun, this is Sudan, but part of the problem is that children are affected, women are being raped as part of that humanitarian crisis. And oftentimes, when we have conflict situations, women and children are the major victims in the whole of West Darfur, either during the time of Omar al-Bashir or now the RSF that was created by al-Bashir. It's women and children who are suffering most. And we're talking about International Women's Day. Women in conflict situations What can the international community still do to protect women in conflict situations?
I mean, it's the same issue we talked about earlier, because even in Nigeria, from Boko Haram, northeast to the northwest, wherever we have raids and ransacks, it's women that get affected disproportionately. But it's also the same narrative, because if women are seen as dispensable, whatever mechanisms that are put together to either mitigate a war or end a war tends not to factor in how to protect them. And then you then have a regime in the world now where aid is being cut significantly across the world. So humanitarian support and aid that will go to support some of these programs that do look out for women and children are also being cut off. I think literally it's just more storytelling and focusing not just the fact that there is a war or the protagonist or going to court, but showing the stories from the perspectives of those who are most affected.
Well, let's end the program today on very somber note. Former presidential spokesperson to President Olusegun Obasanjo and President Goodluck Jonathan, Dr. Doyin Okupe, has died at 72. Okupe, from Iperuremo in Ogun State, passed away early Friday in Lagos after an illness. Ikane local government chairman, Jamiu Ashime, confirmed his death. A medical doctor turned politician, Okupe served as Obasanjo's special assistant on media and publicity and Jonathan's senior special assistant on public affairs. He was also the former director general of Peter Obi's 2023 presidential campaign, but resigned after a money laundering conviction in 2022. Despite political controversies, Dr. Okupe remained outspoken, later backing President Bola Tinubu. He co-founded Royal Cross Medical Center and was the National Publicity Secretary of the National Republican Convention. Dr. Doyin Okupe, let me start with you, Yemi Adamolekun.
I'll take my cue from Simon Kolawale's blurb at the back of This Day Today, where he said they had a conversation about him writing a book about his journey, but they never concluded.
Well, he wrote a book to mark his 70th birthday. He did.
No, this was recent. I mean, it was a recent, a relatively recent conversation, maybe 2 years ago. And I think there are lots of stories in the journey that he's had. And I think for me, it would have been very interesting to hear his reflections on his failed run with Peter Obi, let me put it that way, his switch to Bola Tinubu, and sort of reflecting over what that looks like. He had overcome significant health challenges, and the last clip that I saw of him was him talking about now devoting his life to talk about the power of God, having seen God come through for him. But yeah, he lived a very full life, and we wish his family and his loved ones, send our condolences to his family and his loved ones.
Mr. Ologun.
Condolences to the family. Years ago, over 30 years now, I had a one-on-one with him while managing the account of Treasury and Finance then. And very pleasant man, and he has come, he has served, and he has departed the stage. And the lesson for everyone, like I always say, is that it's only God that will not leave office. And if we live with that consciousness, we live to add value to the society. And I believe he must have been driven in the direction of accomplishing his interest in the area of goals in life. So condolences to his family and the people of Ogun State and Nigeria at large.
Professor Aworawo.
Well, my sympathies to his family, all those who knew him. I think he was your close friend. Sympathies to all those who knew him very closely. We ran into each other a couple of times, but not very closely. We had his time. I will recall when he was the spokesperson for President Obasanjo. He was very measured and very moderate, which is why his last, the comments he began to make in the last couple of months, maybe the last 1 year or so, were very surprising to me, because when he took up a job that required him to be nasty, He was not. He was measured. He was, he adopted a very measured approach to it, and it was respectable. But in the last 1 year or so, the comments, he began to make about the present government, and I mean, we discussed it here that one time he said we could liken President Tinubu to Jesus Christ. And these are things people have been writing online. People have not been very kind to him. Yes, they've been very nasty online, but I think that is not right. When you want to look at a human being, you look at him in totality, not just pick a few things and then. Unfortunately, those seem to be the things defining his legacy. And the lesson is that we have to be very careful. Small things could be what people remember us for, which are negative.
Which is because that's what they see now, because the Obasanjo content is not available.
Okay.
He was a great Nigerian. My sympathies to all those who needed his family.
Okay. Let's go back to Professor Kila in Abuja. Professor Kila, your tribute to Dr. Doyin Okupe, now blessed memory.
Well, I mean, yes, Dr. Doyin Okupe, I had a very personal relationship. Not just because we went to the same school. He was a lot of years ahead of me. But we also had a lot of personal exchanges. For some reason, we were never on the same side politically. We were always on different sides. But the personal relationship is what I remember about him. And I think I would like to remember him as an accomplished professional, getting an MBBS and being a medical doctor and being, a noticeable humanitarian is not an easy feat. He has gone the way of all mortals, which is to die at the end. I think the lesson here really is that it will be good for everybody to live their life in view of their obituary. To think what will be said of me when time is gone, or what do I want to be said of me. I think if we think that way, it will help the world generally. Of course, our thoughts and prayer with the family. People like me will put politics totally aside now and focus on the personal relationship and know that whatever you think of him in the public life, some people are in pain for the loss. Okay. And as we Christians say, we wish his soul to rest in peace.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Kila. Thank you, Professor Aworawo. Thank you, Mr. Jide Ologun, and thank you, Yemi Adamolekun. Yemi Adamolekun referred to the statement by Senator Yemi Bamidele. That statement is available on pages 14 to 15 of today's edition of This Day newspaper, This Day on Sunday, pages 14 to 15. You will find Senator Yemi Bamidele's statement there. And as for the biography of Dr. Doyin Okupe, he actually wrote and published and did a public presentation of a biography 2 years ago. It's titled Double Jeopardy, and that book was publicly presented at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. It contains his personal story and also his political views. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From our entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now. And thank you very much for watching.